Hey Catalyst community, we just interviewed sports psychologist Hugh Gilmore, who specializes in the area of motivational interviewing. He's out of Northern Ireland and his insights into this topic are so fascinating. Now, some of you are coaches, you work with motivational interviewing all the time. I can promise you, you will get so much out of this interview. And some of you are saying, motivational what? Motivational interviewing. Whether you're a parent, a teacher, a leader, an athlete, or a coach, you are going to glean so much value out of this. He did such a good job. We ran down a lot of rabbit trails, and I think you'll have a lot of fun with this. Now, as always, this is an advanced version of an interview that'll hit the Catalyst Health, Wellness, Performance Coaching podcast in the next week or two, but we want to get this out to you early if you're a subscriber here on the YouTube coaching channel. And of course, if you're not yet, here's your encouragement to do so. So enjoy the interview, and let's go be a catalyst.
All right, Hugh, it's good to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us, buddy.
Good to be here, Bradford. It's a great honor to be invited onto the podcast. I was a bit intimidated when I first went on and I looked at all your previous guests. I thought, am I good enough? Am I good enough to be?
Do I belong here?
Do I belong? I'm in the wrong place.
Oh, no, not at all. Super excited. And our coaches are excited too, because, we address health, wellness, and performance here. And you're very much in that performance camp. But the motivational interviewing that you get into, that is such a core area for anyone who's doing health and wellness coaching or performance coaching. And yet, unfortunately, a lot of people are like, wait, what motivational what now? So we definitely want to dig into that. I think people will be excited about that. Let's talk about, speaking of what you just said about, do I belong there? The whole idea of competition anxiety, you work with that. Like, you help athletes work through and minimize that competition anxiety. Can you talk us through some of the strategies that might be helpful, not just maybe for competition, but maybe for that big speech you're going to do, or you're being on the Catalyst Health, Wellness, Performance Coaching podcast, or you are an athlete and you've got your next big race or whatever. Just some things that would cross over multiple settings for us.
Yeah, certainly. So when we think about anxiety can be caused by two different things, or caused is the wrong term. We can have two symptoms of it. We can have cognitive anxiety, which is the thoughts of, oh no, I shouldn't be on this podcast. Or we could have the somatic anxiety, which is my heart's racing, my palms are sweaty, I've got butterfly in my stomach. What's going on there? Why am I experiencing these symptoms? So there's two ways we can experience anxiety. And whenever we do experience it that way, my first go-to would be generally try and treat the anxiety the way it's experienced. So if you've got cognitive anxiety, you would try and tackle it with reappraising those cognitive thoughts. And if you've got somatic anxiety, you would reappraise it by trying some deregulation or downregulation techniques, such as deep breathing, maybe some imagery, things like that would actually help you sort of regulate your physiological symptoms. So I think the big thing for me is that I always go to the experience of, what is it when somebody gets anxiety? How do we know it's anxiety? And when they talk to me about that, they often talk about, they get the feeling of butterflies in their stomach. And if I'm right and I'm remembering my biology, that's called vascular shunt, where your veins contract and the blood leaves your stomach, and that's part of the flight or freeze response that we get because your body's dumping in adrenaline. So if you think about it, when somebody's actually experiencing anxiety, they get this feeling of the butterflies. And that's caused by adrenaline. And adrenaline increases pain threshold. It increases speed of neuromuscular contraction, and it increases your ability to react and think and be sharp. Adrenaline's pretty much like performance-enhancing drugs.
Yeah, totally PED.
Except it's allowed and it's useful, and you have lots of it and you can use it. The difference is that we don't know when we're actually getting up for it versus getting too up for it. And whenever what I explain to the athletes is the approach I would normally take is I explain, tell me what anxiety feels like. We write down all the symptoms, and I say, okay, now tell me what excitement feels like. You're going out on a date with somebody you fancy, or you're a kid, and if you celebrate Christmas, it's Christmas Day, and the presents are all inside, and you're sort of waiting to see what you've got, or your birthday. talk to me about what those feelings are. And it's the exact same feelings. So the feeling of anxiety is the feeling also of excitement. The only difference is then the appraisal of it, the judgment of it, the thoughts. And then at that point, you would start to sort of appraise, are these thoughts helpful? Because if I'm thinking, there's my adrenaline kicking in, I'm going to be fast, I'm going to be sharp, I'm ready for this, I'm up for this. Those are different thoughts than, oh no, what's going on? I'm getting a bit sweaty and a bit hot. So that's kind of like the basic approach I would take with anxiety. But then I'd also, because I'm trained in REBT, rational emotive behavior therapy, to go in a deeper dive in terms of psychology, I look at this from the point of view of there's 4 different ways I can tackle your anxiety. I can change the situation, which is you're in a situation and you're judging that situation to cause you anxiety, which is the big talk or the big game, the big final, whatever it is. Well, then don't do the big talk, don't do the big final, or don't be a part of the big game, and you won't have the anxiety. Solved, isn't it? So
stay mediocre and there won't be any issue.
Yeah. So, and we can do that. I mean, there are things in life we can avoid that we don't need to do. And that's perfectly fine if you want to use that strategy. The only thing is you don't change, the situation changes. But then, and that's an easy thing to do. But then the next level up would be behavioral skill. So we can teach you some skills around what to do or how to behave in that situation. And that might be, as I mentioned, some deep breathing. That might also be, say, if you've got social anxiety and you're not great with speaking with people, you could learn how to communicate better. I found MI is something really useful for that. But you can learn how to communicate better. But even still, if you've got social anxiety or are worried about this aspect of, say, being in a room with people and having to interact, I can teach you all the best behavioral skills. It still doesn't mean that all those people are going to like you. They might all hate you because you might be somebody they don't like. So just because you have the behavioral skill doesn't change the situation. But then you go up to the cognitive level or the thoughts and you say, well, what evidence do I have that these people don't like me? What evidence do I have that I'm going to do bad in this talk? What evidence do I have that I'm going to do poorly in this game or this competition? We can start to challenge those thoughts and we'll find that those go away. But with rational emotive behavior therapy, which was created by Albert Ellis, he looked at how to integrate philosophy into psychotherapy. And the top level change is philosophical change, which is, can I conduct myself and act in a way that I want to act in a world where everyone's going to hate me, where I'm going to go do terrible at the big game, where I'm going to suffer defeats, where I'm going to incur losses, where things are going to be difficult? How do I want to conduct myself in that environment? And what's useful? What's the evidence-based way to conduct myself? And what's the logical way to conduct myself? And that's the philosophical change. So in a sense, I deal with some athletes who've got very serious health conditions because I work in the Paralympic side as well as the Olympic side within sports. And there is a case where, you've got somebody that's having a significant impact on their life and they have to ask themselves, is this worth it? Is this cost worth it? And big questions are asked from time to time. So I think the philosophical side of things is really beneficial in performance and in performance areas, and we can think about this, right? We want to talk about anxiety and we think, right, okay, you've done a bit of deep breathing, you've learned some behavioral skills. As my friend Pete Olusoga says, if you're being shot at by a sniper, deep breathing doesn't get rid of the problem. It's only then at that point in shit situations. Sorry for our listeners who don't like swearing, that's something I do, but you can change your philosophy on that. But in bad situations, you're going to have to work with your philosophy because sometimes there aren't other things that move. You just have to get down to accepting the way things are and acting in the way you want to be. And that's why I like REBT, because in performance, there most definitely is going to be defeats and challenges along the way. Have you any thoughts on any of that? What are your thoughts?
Oh man, you've just unpacked so much for us, man. So people listening, they're going, oh my gosh, I've only listened to 9 minutes of this thing and he's giving me all these tools. So just the reformatting it, just the saying, I chose to come to this big game. This is a great opportunity to be able to do this speech. I'm in a great program and I get to sit for this final exam to show that I know my stuff. Just that piece. And then the reformatting that you did with the butterflies in your stomach. Oh no, what does that mean? Well, it means you're ready to kill it. Like, you're ready to rock and roll, dude, because this is how your body responds to that. So I love the way you laid that out. You gave us so much to work with here. Well, let's keep going. Pressure training. This fits into a little bit of what you were talking about. What does pressure training involve? In our functional mental toughness model, we call it callousing, but it's a similar kind of idea. And how is it utilized for some of the things you've talked about and to take your performance up that next notch? Because it's almost two things. There's like the anxiety, the fear, that kind of stuff is here. And then how do we then, once we get past that, use these other techniques to go another level up?
Pressure training, as I understand it, there's a guy called Mike Stoker who did a lot of research in that and did his PhD on it. And he basically identified that when you want to create pressure, what you have to do is you create the feeling. It's not necessarily trying to replicate the experience, because I can't replicate the experience of going to Tokyo, competing in front of no crowds, in a foreign place where you have to wear masks.
Yeah.
Like, nobody knew we were going to have to try and prepare for that.
Right.
And that, we can't replicate that, but we can replicate the experience of it. And the way we replicate the experience, we were talking about the feeling, how that feels to that person, how that person experiences that situation. What might they experience from a cognitive affective behavioral? I don't like these big words that psychology uses, but I always go, let's talk about your fat, your feelings, actions, thoughts. It's much more simple and people get it. So it's, cognitive affective behavioral. It's like feelings, actions, thoughts. It's the same thing, but in everyday language. So what feelings might a person have? What actions might they need to do? What thoughts might they have? That's their experience. And you're trying to create that experience, that something that they might experience. And you do that by changing, in his research, he talks about changing the task demands, the judgments that might be placed upon the people, fatigue, consequences, rewards, or the social pressure of social judgment and onlookers. And all these things are things that we can manipulate to create more pressure and create a different experience. And the big thing when you're doing pressure training is that you want to get buy-in from the athlete. You say, look, we want to do some pressure training. This is to help you get better, as you called it, callousing. And the reason you want buy-in is because if you just turn up and start doing something to somebody, that's called bullying. And you don't really want to do that, So you get buy-in. And because you get buy-in, they want to do it too. And they engage. And then you decide, look, these are the types of categories we can change. What can we do in your environment to change this? So in weightlifting, one of the things we've done is we've put bin bags over the weights, and the athletes don't know what weight they're lifting. And they have to approach the bar in the way they would normally approach the bar and then lift it and do their best. Now, we've stipulated beforehand the weight's going to be between whatever range to whatever range. Is that okay? They agree the range. And then we look and we watch and go, like, how did they lift that weight? Should we go up? Should we go down? Are they coping? If they're coping well, should we increase the challenge? And the challenge might be making it go lighter, because weightlifting is a skill. It's not just about brute strength. It might be, well, what happens if it goes lighter? Because you're going to get a shock halfway through the pool if you think, oh, this is lighter, and then your position might change. So again, it's challenging the focus and the attention you're putting in. So again, the other thing that we've done is live streaming of training, where athletes live stream the training. And again, that creates social pressure because you've got external judgment going on and onlookers. So there's lots of ways you can do this, but the big thing is you're not replicating the thing that causes pressure. You're replicating the experience or the feeling of the experience. And then you're using those 6 different methods. But like, if we want to go a little bit sort of back in time, this is just the exact same as exposure therapy within clinical psychology. If I want to get you over a phobia, I'm going to change the demands that have been put on you. I'm going to change judgments that have been put on you and the situation that you're in. So if you're afraid of spiders, I'm going to have to put you in a situation where you're surrounded by spiders. You might even have to eat one, and people are going to watch you. And that's going to be very challenging for you. Ideally, that's where I'd like to get you to. But I can guarantee you when you're doing that, you're not afraid of spiders to the same extent you previously were.
Right.
So it's like the exposure therapy research is the exact same stuff. It's just been replicated within sport. So I think the two are linked. How does that link in with your calcing and how you approach things?
Come back to that because I want to ask you a follow-up question on that. As you're talking that through, I'm thinking that athletes, you probably don't have any trouble getting buy-in. They're like, yeah, Hugh, you got to get me there. I'll do whatever. Any tips that you've seen, dealt with, whatever, with parents, teachers, leaders who are, the leaders trying to get their employees to step up in this certain situation, or a parent's trying to get their teenager, what if we did this or this? Anything that comes to mind? I know that's not your specific area, but anything comes to mind that might be helpful for somebody outside of the typically super ultra motivated athletic setting?
Okay, so I'm gonna challenge you in something there. I don't see anybody who's super ultra motivated.
Oh, interesting.
I see humans, and if you're at the very top of your game, me coming along and trying to add something in is potentially speaking a disruptor to your process. It's new. And when we put in new things, if I go and teach you a new language, that's going to take time out of your day, and that's going to disrupt other things, and there's going to be a cost to it. So there's no such thing as a perfect intervention. We can talk more about this because, what this is there's an idea that performance is about setting bricks of inputs on top of each other until we build this nice big performance wall of, here, have some pressure training, now have some coaching for your anxiety, and now we'll do some skills practice, and then we'll do some strategy stuff and some physio. We build this lovely big wall. And actually it's not like that. Performance is dynamic and changes, and the components within performance are fluctuate based on the state of the body and the current state of the athlete, in line with the demands that have been placed on the different components. So your muscles and ligaments can take a lot of force, but they need time to recover. But then also you've got fatigue, general fatigue. You've also got then mental and physical fatigue. You've got then, how do you recover from that? What's your social circle like, and what's that put on? It's like every input interacts with all the other inputs. So it's not like building a wall. It's more like making a soup. If you put something in, you can put too little in, you can put too much in, and you can put the right amount in, which is optimizing it, which is a word I know you like. So like I call that Goldilocks zone, where you basically, the story of Goldilocks and the three bears. Too hot, too cold, just right. Mm-hmm. Too hard, too soft, just right. Every component you put in needs to be just right. And you only know it's just right if you're making soup. If you taste it and go, ooh, a little bit too much went in there, I need something to change that up, or I need to learn from that. And that's why when we look at performance, you can be doing everything right and getting the wrong result. Because I can make spaghetti bolognese and lasagna and pizza, but if I try and make them all together, you're not going to be happy with what I give you. So it's cooking. You cook performance in an integrative system where everything's complex and dynamic and moving and interactive, like cooking a meal or soup or something like that. It's not just stack bricks on another. Sorry, I've gone down a rabbit hole there.
No, I love that analogy, and I just kind of sort of wish I was in Northern Ireland with you right now, because it sounds like dinner's going to be pretty good tonight. But we're doing this remotely, so that's the way it goes. But I love that analogy here: the making soup versus building a wall. That's powerful. That's why you're good at what you do. Let's jump down the MI trail a little bit here. Motivational interviewing. It's one of the things that we found you because of this term. It's a key area in the coaching profession. How did that initially get your attention, and why is it so important to your practice as a performance psychologist?
It first got my attention because my mom went on a course and she did some motivational interviewing, and she came back to me and said, My mum worked in essentially working, not like a social worker, but kind of in for a charity doing similar type things, working with families in deprived areas. And she went and did this motivational interviewing course. She came back and told me about it. And I said, look, you know what? That's a load of rubbish. You can't go off and spend 2 days and learn something. And you know, this isn't how things work like that, you know. And I was right, but she was also right. Something too, you know. And it wasn't until then later on I got invited to a workshop by Rory Mack, who was doing his PhD at the time with Jeff Brecken in Sheffield Hallam, and I went along as part of his PhD study, and I essentially sat down and did the training, and then went off, recorded sessions, and then shared them with him and got feedback. And then as a result of this, went on to do the next levels in motivational interviewing, and then went on to do my Mint accreditation, and join Mint through the Mint test. Sorry, it's not an accreditation process.
And just for those who don't know about Mint, it's the Motivational Interviewing Network of Trainers. Susanna, who heads up our coach training, has been Mint accredited or whatever the phrase is for about a decade. It's a very valuable organization. So if you're thinking about this route, you've now got 2 examples where it's had an impact.
Yeah. So the big thing for me about motivational interviewing is in every situation, every human walks in with a judgment, and some of those judgments you're going to be aware you're making, and some of them you're not going to be aware you're making. And whenever you interact with somebody through motivational interviewing, you're trying to walk in and you're trying to interact with them in such a way that you're taking the assumption that you're kindling their motivation. You're not giving it to them. You're trying to find out what motivation they have and then kindle that and grow it from inside. So that intrinsic motivation. Quite often, you know, we come in and tell people what to do. And the research clearly shows when you take a motivational interviewing approach, you get 5 times more likelihood of behavioral change. And think about that. Why would you not change? You know, well, if it's the right thing to do, there might be costs in terms of changing. The part of changing is admitting that, well, you haven't been doing things the best way. But then there's also like, what's the cost of changing? Maybe I like smoking because smoking gives me some time out to myself.
Right.
You know, maybe I like the comfort eating because it helps me get through the day.
Right.
You know, but even in performance settings, it's like, well, maybe it's not time for me to put in these new editions of pressure training, or maybe it's not time for me to go and spend time with a physio or psych because I'm too busy with other things. So it's about reevaluating how people think and trying to understand them and be curious. And the best thing I've heard is MI works from the assumption that clients who seek help are ambivalent about change and that their motivation changes during the course of therapy. And that's in a paper by Westra and Arkovitz, 2011. But the idea being that, you know, when you go in and you sit down with somebody, you can get them motivated, and the motivation will go up and down depending on how and what you say to them. But you want them to argue for the change. Yes. And motivational interviewing gives you the skill of getting them to argue for the change as opposed to telling them.
Right.
And look, I'll make it very simple for you. Do they have curry houses over in America where you go in, you get a curry?
Maybe, but not that I'm aware of.
Right. Is there any sort of thing where you go in to eat and the waiter will come out and set down a hot plate and say, don't touch that, it's hot?
All the time. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Okay. What do you do when he says that or she says that?
Well, I back away, but there's been times that I'm talking to my wife or something and I don't even hear it and I go, So I've seen both ends of the spectrum for me.
Well, the big thing is when somebody comes in and sets down this hot plate, says, don't touch it. The first thing you go like, who the hell are you to tell me what to do? And then I'll touch that plate.
Is it really hot?
I'll tell you if it's hot. And you reach out and you go like, yeah, it's hot. Because nobody likes being told what to do. And we've got this thing called psychological reactance, which is if you tell me what to do, I can only express my autonomy, my freedom, by actually going and going and rebelling against you. And you can think about this. Every teenager, you know, it's like the parents tell them what to do, and the kids go, well, I'm not going to be told what to do. I'll do the opposite, you know?
Right. Or employees. Or
employees, yeah.
Team members, if you're the coach of some, yeah.
I mean, the best thing you can do is instead of telling people what to do, you say, look, we've got this problem. How do you think you can contribute towards it? And how do you think you can help? And what can we do better? and what do you need for me to help you achieve this? And they'll give you all the answers and go, and then you just go, oh, those are all great. And what about, could you deal with this issue or that blind side? The people have the answers most of the time inside them. And I've sat in the board of directors for Netball Northern Ireland. And the biggest thing I find myself doing was saying to people, right, what is it you think we can do? What can you actually do? And if you can do that, go and do that. Let's not worry about all the other things that are going wrong. Just tell me what you can do and do that. And if we can get that small bit of progress, that's fine. And what you find is it snowballs in. The going back to that complex soup analogy, that's how avalanches occur. Avalanches occur not because of a snowflake landing at the wrong time. They occur because the potential has been built up, and one aspect of it releases that change, and then you get multiple changes. And I've seen this time and time again with clients where you hit the right thing like a domino or a snowflake and an avalanche, and then everything starts changes. Change cascades throughout their life because they've found the key habit, the key thing that they needed to change. Doesn't mean we know what that is, but part of
the soup.
It's part of finding that out. Taste it and retry it. Sorry, I keep going down rabbit hole.
No. This is what we brought you in for. This is great. I don't know if you know the name Tom Peters. He's very, very well-known business writer. He wrote In Search of Excellence back in the probably early to mid 80s. Biggest selling business book in history up through mid 90s. We had him on last year, and he would be smiling ear to ear to hear the things you're talking about from the athlete's perspective that would apply so well to any kind of an employment setting, because what you're describing, that's what we need to do more of. And I like the way you said that. I didn't answer your question about callousing. So callousing in the FMT diagram is part of the triad of thrive, prepare, and activate under the prepare aspect primarily. And it's really exactly what you described. It's the idea of going out and doing a tempo run at a faster pace but shorter distance so that you're ready for that. Your brain is not going, oh no, I can't run a 5:20 mile. You're able to at that point. It's the getting used to, I only slept 5 hours last night. Well, you might only sleep 5 hours before a competition. How are you going to feel that next morning knowing that could, so it's those types of things. So it sounds like it's very, very similar. All right, let's talk about performance goals versus learning goals. Which concept, I'm sure as a sports psychologist, many of your clients' goals are more performance oriented. Which concepts of MI, motivational interviewing, do you think are most important when coaching individuals with performance goals? And then how might that use of MI shift when you're looking more at learning goals?
When you think a performance goal is obviously the outcome, and a learning goal is, the process about how you might actually then go around changing your process to do that. I really like the phrase of like, we learn how to perform. The idea is that because of technological advancements and everything else, is a great quote. I can't remember who said it, but it's something along the lines of, because of technological advancements and all the other things that have been shared and the accessibility to knowledge and everything else, the greatest performance enhancing benefit might be the rate at which we learn. And if you think about it as an athlete, why do we think that lifting, 5 kilo more or running, a tenth of a second faster is a performance thing and not a learned thing? Because ultimately all the things that you put into that, the preparation of getting your body into that state, you have to learn how to do that. You also have to learn how to do your pre-performance routine beforehand. You have to learn how to prepare adequately for it, in the warm-up. Everything about that is a learned process. So I don't think the performance and learning is separate. But for me, what MI is it's helping the sports psych and the coach and the physio understand each other and understand how to best support somebody to achieve something. When you approach things from an MI point of view, you're not going in with the answer. You're going in curious, and then you're curious as to why is this not already happening? And then you're curious as to what the physio thinks. And you're trying to essentially create a shared mental model where the physio's idea overlaps with the athlete's idea overlaps with the coach's idea and the psych's idea, and they all overlap and they do it. And then what's really important is that you get rid of that shared mental model, because you need to learn how to lift 1 kilo more. And you go, well, that's what worked last time. We don't know what's going to work this time to get this next, what do we need to add and change? So we need to have them more disagreement. So I often can be heard saying that we have to have performance disagreements and performance agreements. And it's a process of disagreement, agreement, disagreement, agreement, and getting there as a team to support an athlete. And the issue is that we're not allowed to all think the same, because if we all think the same, then you aren't bringing anything new to the team. So we need to have a way of disagreement, and MI helps us do that, because when it comes to MI, we're not bought into our ideas. We're bought into understanding other people's ideas and helping understand why they think the way they do. I think the big thing about it is, like, I've actually sat down with my performance team and taught them the basics of MI, because it makes for a better experience for the athletes and makes for a better experience for the performance team whenever they're working with athletes. So, why wouldn't you get your physio, your nutritionist, your performance director all using MI? Because it allows for a better experience, and it's part of how we've created a culture that stands out within the UK, within British weightlifting.
So I just want to jump in here, because I think we need to promote you to Twitter controller of the universe. I think we need you on Twitter, and everybody has to understand. I think if we switch Twitter to what you just described, going in curious, not going in to beat somebody over the head or go, you're an idiot or whatever. If everybody came in, so Hugh, I think you need to take a different route in your career here, buddy. We need to put you in charge of Twitter.
Look, do you know what? I used to be that person who went in and beat people over the head, and it's
really
very,
interesting.
It's very easy, because when you know stuff, you're like, oh wait, they're doing it wrong.
Right.
And I think people have this idea of, when you're helping athletes, it's like, oh, you must be doing something magic. You walk in and there's gains to be made everywhere. The problem is not finding ways to improve performance. It's finding what is the best way to improve performance and what is a less best way. What's actually going to create movement and what's not, what things won't work. So it's not about, coming in with some magic. There's lots of ways to improve an athlete's performance. It's finding out what they can change, what they're willing to change, what they can be supported to help change, and then working on that. But if you go in going, well, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and this is wrong, all you do is pointing out the mistakes, and actually that's great. You might be right.
Doesn't matter.
But you're being right in the wrong way.
Yeah.
And we need to start being right in the right way. Right. That's what it's about. And I think, I've had to delete all my old tweets because of the shame of how I used to challenge people on Twitter.
That is awesome.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And I hope the parents, the leaders, we're talking athletes here. We're talking performance enhancement, but as he's talking, I'm sure you're hearing this. Like, think if you approached parenting in this way. Think if you approached friendship in this way. Forget Twitter. Look at friendship, leadership, parenting, the same tools, same techniques, strategies, huge impact. So let's just, my next question actually ties right into that. Which MI concepts do you think are most critical in everyday communication? So if you and I are buddies, we're sitting down for a cup of coffee or beer, what tools from MI might help us build our working friend relationship, whatever it might be?
It's very interesting. I think in my early stages of MI, I would have talked about open questions, reflections, affirmations, and summaries. Those are the skills of MI that people go, yeah, I've got these skills. I know what to say. But actually, these things are what would you say? These are what we sort of measure, and we can count how many open questions you do to
Oars.
reflections. Yeah, your oars as the acronym is. But we could say if you get 2 reflections to every open question, you're more likely going to have a behavior change conversation. But for me, as you struggle through and you get better and better at MI, you have to keep going back to the spirit as it's known. And the spirit is how do you approach the conversation? And the spirit is made up of, I'm just going to say this before I go any further, I don't like the term spirit. It sounds a bit fluffy. I like straight talking, stuff. So I often change the spirit to psychology terms, we call it philosophy, or in everyday language, if you're talking to your family, your intent. What's your intent in your interaction? So if we think of what intent do we want to have an MI consistent conversation, we need to have the intent of partnership, the intent of acceptance where somebody is at, the intent of showing compassion for their experience, and the intent of sharing accurate empathy for them. And we know from the research, like Wampel 2015, I think it is, the Common Factors paper, empathy is one of the biggest things that predicts change within therapy. So if you go in being empathetic, compassionate, showing acceptance and seeking partnership, then you're more likely going to come out of a place in a good situation. And I think, let's talk politics. I know it's a bit
no, let's not.
It's a bit iffy to do that. But I don't care what political situation. I come from Northern Ireland, so I know a little bit about how politics can be difficult. But I don't care what situation you go into. If you get two people going in with partnership, acceptance of where the other people are at, showing compassion and seeking to show empathy for the other person's position, you're going to get somewhere. And that's what we need more of in everyday life, I think.
I love that. I'm just going to say those again. I was jotting them down. So partnership, acceptance, compassion, and then sharing an accurate empathy. Did we get those right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. In one of your presentations, and we were talking about this a little bit offline, but you talk about optimal sleep for performance and recovery. And you make this statement, and I was like, wait, what? You said more sleep isn't necessarily better. Can you pull that curtain back for us a little bit and explain that? People, we've had 3 sleep docs on. People love this topic. Tell us why maybe more isn't always better.
You already know. We've talked about this, right? Go back to the soup. Go back to Goldilocks, right? So what is more? Is more 5 hours? Is more 6 hours more? Is it 10 hours more? Is it 27 hours more? If you sleep 27 hours more every day, you're dead, right?
Or even like 23 hours.
Yeah. So basically, the idea or the common thing that's thrown out is, just do more. And that's the old way of thinking of
for anything.
Like for anything, add in these performance bricks. We add in more sleep. No, we add in the right amount of sleep. Because if you're sleeping, you're not doing other things. I'm not saying sleep less or, because you get in Instagram, you go on Instagram and you get some people who 1 month they're telling you need more sleep, get more sleep. And the next month they're telling you hustle more, get up at 4 a.m. It's like, dude, what is it? Pick one, stick to it. Tell me why. But the thing is that if we think about this from a logical point of view, the level of the amount of sleep you have has an impact on your performance. The quality of sleep you have is going to have an impact on your performance. And if you get a higher quality, then you get better performance. If you get a higher quantity, you get a better performance up to a certain point. And then at a certain point, that's no longer the rate limiter. So we look at what's the most important limiting factor. And at a certain point, you get enough that you don't need any more. Right? It's not the thing that's holding you back.
Or like you said, the trade-off is you didn't get that swim in or whatever it might be.
Yeah. So it is when we sit back and we go, right, I actually have, a dashboard here and every input that I put in, it's turned up or turned down. And there isn't a right answer for me. And there isn't a right answer for next Tuesday. I have to adjust and make decisions. And that's what an educated athlete is somebody who is able to make those adjustments and then share those adjustments with their team. And then, converse about like what might be a bad adjustment, what might be a good adjustment. But generally speaking, I think if I'm wrong, I think below 5 or below 6 hours is called clinically deprived sleep. And there isn't a set number. You don't need 8 hours exactly. There's no other thing where you need
everybody's
8
different.
Of anything.
Right.
Everybody's different, but the variation varies over your age. And what we actually know is if you sleep more than 11 hours, you've got an increased risk of mortality.
Yep.
So that's one of the costs.
Right.
Now, that's not research that I've read, but I got that from Kevin Morgan, who is a professor in sleep at Loughborough University. And he's somebody who's been in to educate us as people who work with Olympic athletes, so that's come direct from him. So I think, you think about this as Goldilocks, not, you don't just add more of anything. And that's why I'm saying that.
Yeah, I'm glad we brought this up, because it just comes back to that soup concept of, you need salt, you need a certain amount of salt, but as soon as you go too much or too little, that blows up your soup. So yeah. It's not a cookbook, whether it's sleep or weights or endurance training or speed work or whatever. We are all so unique, and that variability is so immense between just two common athletes.
And I think that's the thing is, like, you can give two athletes the same program, but if one of them's traveling further to get there, has a more stressful social life, has other demands outside of that, is a student, they're not going to respond the same. Yeah. So it's about get your basics right and then start exploring. Yeah. And what are your basics? Do you even know what is the basic components of creating change within and creating performance? Like, what are those basics? I think, there's a degree of individuality, but it's also like adapting the basics things first. We get too bogged down in the small things. Like, everybody will talk about blue light and glasses to block out blue light. And the thing is, it's not the fact that there's light coming from your phone that keeps you awake. It's the fact that you're on your phone arguing on Twitter. That's keeping you awake. It's the cognitive thoughts of, look.
Wait, the glasses don't block that out?
The glasses don't block out the stress, right? It's what you're doing on your phone. It's not the light from your phone, right? You need to be in a state of calm before you go to sleep. And that's why when you've got a screen on, you find to watch some boring TV like Friends or something like that. But, go and do something that's relaxing. Don't go on Twitter, Facebook, whatever it is, and get hooked into something. That's not what you want, because that gets you aroused and that gets you then woke up. It's not the sleep. I think the other big thing I learned about sleep was, like, sleep is like a bus. If you're waiting to get a bus, or if you're in America, maybe you're getting a train or a subway or whatever, when you're sitting there waiting for it, and it's not coming, you don't start trying to build yourself a bus or a subway, or you don't get up and walk to the next stop and try and, get to the next stop for the next one. You wait for it. And that's what we need to do with sleep. When you're adequately tired, you'll actually sleep. And that's what you're looking to do, is wait until you're tired, then go to bed. And the big advice I give to people is, like, you keep your wake time consistent. That's the first point you seek to control. Yeah. And then you get your go to bed time consistent. And if you ever end up in a bit of a rut, the biggest hack that I have, and people use it if they're depressed and it's affecting their sleep or anxiety, is just stay up. Absolutely thrash yourself, stay up and just be like, you're going to stay up one night because your sleep's bad anyway. By the time you get around to your next bedtime, if you can sustain it, you're going to be tired enough to go to sleep, and you're going to best night's sleep. And it's a quick hack for a reset whenever your sleep's gone all out of whack. So that's something that I find very useful with athletes and myself as well.
That's great. And I think everybody's going to be picturing that tonight when they're like, okay, I'm putting my blue light glasses on. Wait a minute. No, I need to put on my stress resistant, get rid of Instagram and Twitter and all this stuff. Again, unless you're the boss of Twitter, and then we won't have to worry about Twitter being stressful anymore. So we're gonna have to work on that, buddy. Yeah. Last question, and just wide open for you. Take it whatever you want. But I'd love to hear how you're applying your research in your life. Like what is Hugh doing with all this incredible knowledge and great examples and everything else for you to move your life to a better direction path, making, we like to use the phrase better than yesterday. So how are you using some of these concepts or one of these concepts in a simple way to make Hugh's life better than yesterday?
That I think the phrase comes from some Greek philosopher, physician, heal thyself. And I don't know that I am, but I will say, I think the biggest thing that I find that is of great benefit to me is seeking to show compassion for people. Because I think, we all end up in situations where we're getting friction and dealing with difficult interactions. And as soon as we turn into compassion and we turn into acceptance of where they're at, and then we think more about this partnership and this acceptance, we end up having a better interaction, being a better father, being a better partner, being a better coworker. And I think for me, that's probably the most changing thing that I've done. And I'm going to say it's not easy, because when you're having an altercation with somebody or a discussion, or it's not working, it's difficult to get out of your own head and get into the head of being curious and checking your intent. So I think for me, that's something that's made a big difference for me, and has allowed me to have really difficult and pointy conversations over the years. Really top end pointy conversations. So I think that's quite useful. But also people pick up on that. People don't get that very often. And if you can lead with that, that leaves that person thinking, wow, whatever just happened, I want more of that. And, then we're collaborating. So I think for me, that's the big thing. It's difficult to do, especially when you're stressed out. So I think at times, too often, I think with my partner, I can come in and this is not a problem. We'll just do this. No, that's psychological reactance. Go back and just acknowledge how they're experiencing, and you get a better home life. And I think that's what I think is the most successful thing. Other than that, I'm still trying to lose a bit of weight and get back to my youthful days of being a bit more athletic. But I think that would be my answer.
I like it. That's powerful. My friend, this was really good. Thank you so much for joining us. You were asking at the beginning, you're like, do I belong on this? I saw all your other guests. You crushed it. So very well done. Thanks so much.
It's a great honor to be asked on. I really am appreciative, because I have looked through the guest list and I've seen the episode with Jonathan Fader as well. Yeah. Because he was on our podcast, 80% Mental, and he crushed it as well. I'm just like, wow, it's nice to have him on. Yeah. But thank you very much, and all the best.